Oh, yeah, we can put it there on 40 the side of the... Yeah, 4 days over the thing, but even if that's a little
A miracle is a positive event in our lives that seems to oppose the laws of physics or the natural order of things. Perhaps miracles are natural events outside of peripheral perception or beyond the limits of human reasoning that gives hope in times of despair or uncertainty. Take a moment and think of all the people who are so commonplace in your daily affairs. They seem to be non existent or completely invisible at times, such as a housekeeper, security guards, maintenance personnel, students, clerks, groundspeople, local grocer, or even a spouse. At times, gender, race, and cultural groups seem to ride in a perceptual blind spot of social recognition. There is a good chance that even people of prestigious positions, such as a mayor, senator, constable, banker, or your own child's teacher, goes unnoticed, and you may have experienced difficulty with their names or would not recognize them at a social function. Certainly, the people that hosted such a function, the workers, the servers, and those that prepared the food and drink, dwell in the peripheral blind spot of social invisibility. Could it be that there is an everyday, ordinary, common God, as close as the invisible nose on your face, working miracles in your life? I met Mary a few years back while doing research on the origin and history of the Medina Dam Reservoir in rural South Texas, the oldest concrete reservoir developed, financed, and engineered by a man who lost his life on the Lusitania, torpedoed by a German U-boat, U-20, on 7 May 1915, an event that brought the United States into the Great World War, known as World War I, as a matter of history repeating World War II. The Medina Reservoir irrigation system was expanded during the Roosevelt's New Deal era, creating thousands of jobs for the undereducated unemployed after the Black Monday stock market crash of 1929 into a recession so deep it is remembered as the Great Depression, the biggest financial meltdown in the history of the United States, which had an effect on the world's economic health for the next 40 years. I have forgotten the Medina Reservoir developer's name engraved on a brass plate that is no longer accessible as in days of my youth, fenced in with high barbed wire fences, financed by the 9/11 Patriot Act in the name of national security by the newly formed Texas Anti-Terrorism Task Force while I was away working in China. Little did I know the Anti-Terrorism Task Force brought back the corruption of the McCarthyism era, 1940s to 1950s, an anti-communism domestic surveillance program developed by the Federal Bureau of Investigation, led by J. Edgar Hoover, dictating we the people as enemies of the state. Nor as my eyes look for a way to circumvent the barrier for a photograph of the historic marker follow the bottom of the fence upwards over the spiraling razor wire peering into deep space, aware of my tiny insignificance in the whole of things, unaware of a satellite perched over my GPS position, nor did I heed the words that Mary had said, somebody is always watching. In retrospect, now I see, while I was watching out for you, Mary was watching out for me. I can still remember clearly the sad tragedy of the Oklahoma bombing viewed on Saudi satellite TV and wondered about a letter I had just mailed to the Federal Aviation Administration for a replacement FAA Airman certificate housed in the same building. That same afternoon, a Somalian showed me a newspaper with front cover page introducing me for the first time to Osama bin Laden, April 1995. Much later, after Timothy James McVeigh was arrested for the Oklahoma bombing, the same Somalian asked me, Odell, you look just like that guy, Timothy McVeigh. And Americans blamed Muslims for the Oklahoma bomb? What could I say in response? He was right. The first thing we did was blame Islamic extremists for the bombing. Even though I was living thousands of miles away from America, a chill ran up my back concerning terrorism within the U.S. and the domestic program divulged much later by Russ Tice, already in place, that had failed to protect us from the 9/11 attack. Perhaps they were targeting the wrong people. Looking back now, That was the day when domestic surveillance, controlled by top secret America, were turned inward and pointed at everyday ordinary citizens, just as Orwell's 1984 and the April 1995 Unabomber front page New York Times manifesto warned us about. Electronic and bioweapons used on the people of a police state for political control by the elite class we have come to know as the wealthy few. Very few people understand the threat of terrorism has been around for ages. Terrorism is not a new age phenomenon. The 2008 financial collapse root cause was from inside trading by those of public trust, who benefited by creating a false belief of global terror, or those in Congress that signed off on legislation that created the mega-trillion-dollar white elephant top secret America. The 9/11 Act's speed and impact of destruction to global economic health could not have been possible without the incorporation of private security firms and databases or computer applications that were hardwired to favorable responses without an audit trail or any quality assurance systems that once required human intervention. Total reliance of computer applications gave these private firms or any illegitimate state militia the disastrous ability to access payment for goods and services without competitive bids, or worse, corporations were paid for not providing any services at all except for accounts receivable and accounts payable tied to automatic payments from the federal government. Many of these firms and government organizations used blanket covers of national security justified by the 9/11 Patriot Act. The 9/11 Free-for-All Spending Act justified funds and triggered automatic payments without an audit trail or auditors. The best software applications of today or tomorrow will never break through the linguistic sound barrier of binary associations. To know is to be human, without a doubt. Computer devices that produce artificial intelligence are useful tools for mankind. Likewise, as recent history has shown, artificial intelligence has proven to be a very good slave, but also a very bad master. Top Secret America, as the public understands it, assimilated to us by the Washington Post, has been around as long as the threat of terrorism known as domestic surveillance, which created uproar in 2006 when Russ Tice, former NSA intelligence officer, divulged this program in public. The majority of the cost of Top Secret America was approved by legislation passed in the name of national security, justified by the 9/11 Patriot Act, and is an unnecessary expense and burden on the American people with global consequences. Looking back now, that was the day when electronic weapons controlled by NSA were turned outward on Chinese espionage and pointed back to those who bring harm to the harmless. Corporate criminals who sold their souls for profit, divulging classified information to foreign states, and our enemies, such as the Iranian governing power supported by the elite class we have come to know as the wealthy few. Little did I know that Anti-Terrorism Task Force brought back McCarthyism, an anti-communism domestic surveillance program developed by the Federal Bureau of Investigation led by J. Edgar Hoover, would justly identify and link corporate criminals with Chinese espionage as the real enemies of the state. We know it all started in the 1990s with Ronald Reagan Star Wars program, known as Strategic Defense Initiative Organization, SDIO, of electronic intelligence gathering via space systems communications, non-communications signals, electronic warfare, satellite control, telemetry, sensors, and special capability systems, which included neurological research, non-ionizing EMF bioelectric research and development. Electronic warfare targets human beings for political control or can kill without any visible means at any distance. Trillions of dollars have been wasted on a false sense of security, and it is also true trillions of dollars have been prudently invested that keeps us safer. What really disturbed me is when Dick Cheney announced in fall 2008, nobody saw it coming. His justification seemed odd to me for leadership to invest all our assets into Star Wars space technology that allows us to see a speck of dust on the end of an elephant's nose. After our first astronauts warned us they could see out of their spaceship portals, history repeating back on Earth. They described the length and measure of the Great Wall of China, which took hundreds of years to build, and in the end, the result was the same white elephant or false sense of security. which cost thousands of lives and collapsed an empire. Nobody saw this coming, not even me. Things were indeed just the way Mary had told me. Somebody is always watching. The domestic surveillance program developed by the Federal Bureau of Investigation, led by J. Edgar Hoover, would justly identify and link corporate criminals with Chinese espionage as the real enemies of the state. Maybe it's not too late. Perhaps we can take a few steps backwards for man and a giant leap forward for mankind.
Yeah, 4 days, thank you, what's up? Oh, yeah, we're going to go 4 days,